Yesterday, Trump announced reciprocal tariffs that he would be implementing on countries that we import and export from. As you can imagine, there's a lot of criticism about this move by the mainstream media, the Democrats, and Wall Street. Trump is making the point that we have a trade deficit for decades with all of the countries that we do business with. And just for a little refresher on what a trade deficit is, we import more from other countries in the form of goods and services than we export to these countries. And they are charging us, in many cases, a large tariff on our exports, while we have traditionally charged a small tariff on their imports. This gives us a trade deficit in the billions every year and probably over $1 trillion at times. Trump wants to level the playing field a little bit so that the U.S. stops getting the short end of the stick in these deals. Now, for some reason, past presidents have never really done anything about the U.S. getting ripped off like this, but Trump wants to change that. I mean, our jobs and manufacturing have gone overseas for decades, putting Americans out of work and closing factories. Now, the leaders of these countries that Trump is raising our tariffs on, of course, they are complaining and they are making threats, but they could negotiate with Trump at any time. He has always said that he has a very willing attitude to pick up the phone, talk with anybody, and negotiate. Trump would be fair with anyone who wants to be fair with the United States. Now, the stock market has responded to these impending tariffs with a sell-off. What does this do to your 401k, your retirement account, or any stocks that you have invested in the stock market? Of course, everything's going down, and this makes people angry. But as an average working person myself, I have a retirement account in the stock market. Is my portfolio going down? Yes. Am I worried about it? No. Now, to be fair, I have a few more years left until I retire, so I'm confident that my portfolio will recover. But people who are about to retire or already retired, I'm sure they're angry. But in the end, I believe Trump's America First policy, I think this tariff act goes a long way with making America first. Let me show you a chart that Trump put up yesterday showing the differences in the tariffs from our country to these other countries. This was just an example of, he had a long list of the different countries that we trade with and the deficits. And as you can see, Trump was pointing out that China has been charging us a 67% tariff on anything that we import to their country. He wants to reciprocate with a 34% tariff now. The European Union, they've been charging us 39%. He wants to go to 20% on them. Vietnam, while, he made the point that, he loves these people, thinks they're great countries, great people, and he doesn't blame the people in the country, but they are charging us a 90% tariff on anything that we import into their country. Taiwan, 64%. Japan, 46%. India, 52%. And as you can see, here are the reciprocal amounts that he wants to put on them. And in a lot of cases, it's half of what they're charging us. And I think that's fair. Look at Thailand, 72% tariff on our goods. He's going to put a 36% tariff, and so on and so on. There were a couple lists. I think there are at least 4 lists of countries that he was pointing out what their tariffs are and what our reciprocal tariffs are going to be. But let's look at Trump making the announcement for the tariffs, and let's see what he had to say.
Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. And starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating, but we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. If you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? Thank you very much. I'm going to hand out these pens. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country.
To be honest, I really just feel like this is his way of telling these countries that we want you to be fair with us. You know, I do not think that these tariffs are going to last a long time. I think these countries are going to realize that they're not dealing with Joe Biden anymore. They're dealing with Donald Trump. And he means business. And I really, really think that they are going to negotiate lower tariffs on us. But let's look at a video from CNN with Caroline Levitt and what she had to say about it.
Tariff announcement, global stock markets falling, and the world's biggest economies vowing retaliation. This in response to President Trump announcing an across-the-board tariff of 10% on all imports coming into the United States starting this weekend. And for some 60 countries, the rate is even higher. Futures have been down sharply this morning. You take a look at it right there. Ahead of the opening bell coming next hour, the NASDAQ down just shy of 4% at this point. China, hardest hit by the tariffs, responded overnight to the tariffs, saying that it will, quote, safeguard its own rights and interests. The European Union saying that it's preparing countermeasures. The European Commission president saying this: if you take on one of us, you take on all of us. Joining us right now is White House Press Secretary Caroline Levitt. Caroline, thank you very much for your time this morning. There's been a lot of reaction overnight since the announcement and since we all basically were asleep. What is the White House reaction to, as we just had those numbers up, global markets tumbling this morning and futures down sharply?
To anyone on Wall Street this morning, I would say trust in President Trump. This is a president who is doubling down on his proven economic formula from his first term. We saw wages increase. We saw inflation come down. We had a Trump energy boom. We had the largest tax cuts in history. And that's exactly what the president intends to do following his historic announcement yesterday for reciprocal tariffs. It's the golden age rule for the golden age of America. And the United States of America is no longer going to be cheated by foreign nations around the world. And as the president declared yesterday, this is indeed a national emergency. We have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit and counting. We've had 90,000 factories close in the last couple of decades. Since 1997, Americans have been put out of 5 million manufacturing jobs. These are not just statistics. These are real American lives that have been impacted. And it's about time we have a president who actually does something about it. This is going to restore more wealth, more jobs, more economic prosperity to our great country.
The foreign minister of Norway in Brussels for NATO meetings said this morning that the tariffs could violate an article of the NATO treaty that orders members to promote economic stability and collaboration. If this is a breach of the NATO treaty, will the president reassess his approach?
No, the president is firm in his approach, and the president is ensuring economic stability here in the United States of America. Yesterday, he was joined in the Rose Garden by everyday Americans, middle-class workers. You heard from one of them who the president invited on stage by name because he knows this man and he knows what the impact of globalization has done to communities like Detroit, Michigan, where auto workers have been put out of jobs, where we've seen factories shut down. We have offshored critical supply chains in our country. Do we want our critical supplies like life-saving medical medicines and chips being made in China, or do we want them being made right here in the United States of America?
I just want to pause there for a second and point out that during COVID, the 2020 mess, worst year of our lives, it came to my attention that 90+% of our pharmaceuticals were produced in China. They could have killed us if they wanted to. We were at their mercy to get the drugs that we needed to help the American people with this terrible virus that they sent over to us. So I agree with what she's saying here.
Every American knows the answer to that question. This is a common sense policy. And if these countries wanted to negotiate, if these countries wanted to do what's right, they've had 70 years to do it. Instead, they have been ripping off American workers. And President Trump has made it very clear that this is a policy he was going to implement. He campaigned on the idea of fair trade, on tariffs, and nearly 80 million Americans elected him to do it, and he is delivering.
So I totally agree with her assessment there. Let's look at the second video, the second part of this video, finish it up.
How much pain is the president comfortable with Americans feeling, even on a temporary basis?
Well, again, to that a wonderful American farmer, the president has your back and he wants to protect you and your family-owned farm. That is the point of these tariffs. As far as
are you going to do anything to ease the pain?
Absolutely. We're working on that every single day. The American people and the naysayers need to look at the whole of government economic approach that this administration is taking. The president has already launched a massive deregulatory agenda, which we know has saved the American taxpayer millions of dollars. He is also unleashing the might of our American energy industry, which we know is the greatest driver of inflation. It's one of the many reasons we had an inflation crisis in the previous administration. The president is unleashing American energy to bring down the cost of living in this country. We also know, again, in the president's first term, while he effectively implemented tariffs, wages went up. The median wage in America went up by $6,500. And so it is the goal of this president to have higher wages, less inflation, and tax cuts. That's the second step of the Trump economic agenda. More money back into the pockets of hardworking American. No taxes on tips, overtime, or Social Security. We're counting on Congress to get it done, and that's the next step of the Trump economic boom.
On taxes, JP Morgan just came out with an analysis in response to this tariff announcement, saying that these tariffs will be the largest tax hike on Americans since 1968, a tax hike by $660 billion a year. What is JP Morgan missing? What are world markets getting wrong? What are, when you see stock futures down, what is everyone missing, including that local farmer in North Carolina?
Well, they're missing the massive revenue that these tariffs are going to bring into the United States. Trillions and trillions of dollars in investment, which leads to more jobs in American communities, higher wages, more money in the pockets of hardworking Americans.
In the most immediate, I mean, these farmers, as Tom Stilla says, farmers are one crop away from bankruptcy. That farmer doesn't have time to wait for tariffs to work their way into the system.
Now, let me just make a point on what she's saying there, that these farmers are one crop away from bankruptcy. I think, let me just first say that I support our farmers. I'm not against our farmers. I am pro any American. But I think if a farmer is one crop away from bankruptcy, I don't think that these tariffs were the cause of it. If they're one crop away from bankruptcy, it happened way before Trump decided that he was going to start putting reciprocal tariffs on these other countries.
The benefit of it to work its way into the system at all. this is going to mean higher prices for Americans. In the most immediate, that's why I asked the question, how
Sorry, cutting in one more time. She's talking about higher prices for Americans. We've endured 4 years of high prices, inflation, high gas rates. Have these people been complaining about it for the last 4 years during the Biden administration? I don't think so. But now, because Trump wants to try and level the playing field for our trade in this country to other countries, now all of a sudden they're worried about high prices.
how much pain on a temporary basis is okay? What's the standard that the president is looking at in terms of how much pain Americans can feel on a temporary basis that he's okay with?
Again, the president is focused every single day on lowering the cost of living in this country while simultaneously implementing these very effective tariffs. Massive deregulation, an energy boom, and tax cuts are the economic formula that will mean more prosperity and the lower cost of living. And it's a proven formula. Look at President Trump's first term and the results. When he left office, inflation was 1.4%. He implemented many tariffs in his first term that did bring in billions of dollars in revenue. In fact, the previous administration knew they were so effective, that's why they left them in place. So again, the president is delivering on his promise to implement reciprocal tariffs while his administration is working hard every day to cut regulation, to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse in our federal government as well. And tax cuts are the next step of this economic agenda, which will lead to more investment, more money in our economy, more economic growth.
So well said, I think. And what I just want to conclude with is I think these tariffs will send a message to these other countries that we're not going to get taken advantage of anymore. I think it's a good thing. I also don't think that they will last for a very long time. And I just want to point out that one of the points that Caroline was making is Trump is planning tax cuts for Americans that will help with, the cost of living. And the other thing is the deregulation that she's talking about, which lowers the cost of operating a business, allows more competitors to come in, enter the market, which also lowers the prices for Americans, unleashing the energy that we can produce in this country, which will lower our gas prices. All of these things are in the pipeline, and I think people need to give Trump a little bit of a chance. He's only been in office for a few months and done a tremendous amount. So in my opinion, I think this plan is a good one. I am very much in support of Trump giving the America First mantra, which I totally agree with. It is about time that we stop getting taken advantage of by these other countries. I mean, I really feel like we've been fools for decades being taken advantage of. And I'm just thrilled with the way Trump is handling it. And I support these tariffs. But I mean, what do you guys think? What are your opinion about it? Is it too big of a hardship for the American people? Is it a good plan? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I really, really value what you say, and I appreciate you supporting my channel, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.